He loves G2. He just fillets them all days of the week.
The games were good. What?
This is the most chaotic episode we have ever had. I love it. It's amazing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the jungle. I am Ginny, joined with Medic, Cubby, and Broxah, and today we're going to be talking about the LCS and some of the big players maybe, potentially, possibly retiring. But first of all, let's head straight into G2 Fnatic, because that's been the match of the week for as long as I have been a child. But this time, Fnatic actually won, Medic.
How long have you been a child, Ginny?
Yes.
See how she's acting and treating me. You know the answer.
Yeah. But as long as I've been a child, where does it end? Like, were you a child when you were 0, or was that like were you a baby at that point? Here's a cat, by the way.
I was a baby.
Kiki. Hey, Kiki.
I wish I could be a cat.
Anyway, it has been the match of the week since as long as you were a child. And what a performance it was by Fnatic. I think overall, looking at the series, it's easy to see a close series and say it was poor quality League of Legends. And we've said that a lot in the LEC recently. Hey. But it wasn't. It was really good League of Legends. Both the teams played team fights really well. The macro was relatively solid. I think G2 still generally have an edge in terms of macro. But Fnatic's team fighting was exceptional. And I think you have to call out people like Noah, who consistently have underperformed in big games. And here he's beginning to show up relatively consistently as well. But also Razork. Like, Razork put the team on his back so many times through that series. Before this win for Fnatic, it had been 895 days since they'd last beaten G2 in a best of 5. That's almost back to your playing career, Broxah. And so to now...
That was literally back to his playing career.
Was it? Were you playing the last time Fnatic beat G2 in a best of 5?
Did you ever win against G2, Broxah?
I did not play for Fnatic 800 days ago.
Yeah, that was like 3 years ago. Broxah, actually, yeah, Broxah, did you beat G2 in a best of 5?
Did you ever beat G2? That's like the real question.
What do you mean? Like, of course I.
What do you mean, of course? How many times?
In a best of 5?
Well, the first one that comes to my mind is 2018 spring, when we beat them in Copenhagen and I won my first trophy.
Yeah, but that was reckless beating them, really, wasn't it? You know.
Oh. Oh my God. We're 2 minutes deep into this podcast and Broxah is getting beaten. No, I think bullied is an understatement here. You're getting unalived.
I do remember the Tristana Penna.
Yeah, we're in Sweden. One of the greatest caster calls of all time, if Quickshot had been allowed to finish the line. Because his line was, we're in Sweden, and the Swedish player gets the penta or takes Fnatic through in the series, right? But halfway through the line, Crepo comes in and just shouts, "It's a penta!" It's really funny. It's so good. But people remember it all the time. Anyway,
for what that's worth, that was before my time.
Was that was 2016, 17? 17 must have been, right?
I played
at
17.
15? Man,
you guys
I wasn't
really
there.
don't know the Fnatic lore.
I know.
Can you blame us?
I can't remember the year.
14 or 15. One of those 2 years, probably.
Because then 16 was G2 winning again.
Yeah, 16.
And then Fnatic... 16, 17 was G2, then Fnatic was 18, and then never again.
Pretty much. I do want to point out that 19 was close, as you would know, casting the finals
it was great.
in Athens, where we were up 2-1, and then we shit the bed and got destroyed, and that wasn't good memories, but it was close.
What did you think of it this
What
weekend?
a time to be alive.
I'm gonna.
Were you alive in 2018, Ginny?
I think she was a child in 2018.
I was alive. I wasn't necessarily living.
Okay.
This must
you can interpret that however you want.
Intro so far. Holy moly.
So, I would like to apologize on behalf of myself and every single one of my colleagues, but Broxah, give us some insider feedback.
I don't apologize.
I think we would all like to apologize on behalf of Jeannie for her behavior in each and every episode so far. But with that being said and out of the way, to answer Medic's question, I don't know if I 100% agree that like it was exceptional team fighting and play from both teams. I don't want to go too far down the negative route, but I think while it was an impressive Fnatic win, G2 also looked a lot worse in this best of 5 than they usually do. Because in the past, even if they've struggled in the regular split, they would level up massively. In best of 5s, they would be so good at adapting in draft, and they would always be one step ahead. One thing that caught my attention this time around is the fact that Fnatic actually seemed to have a slight upper hand in some ways from a draft point of view. For example, G2 banned Nidalee 4 games in a row in the first ban phase, and nobody really understood why, because Nidalee usually means insta-loss in LCS and LEC. Game 5, they try to make an adjustment, they leave it open, Fnatic and Razork take it on 2-3, and Razork just goes on a complete rampage and destroys them and secures a win in Game 5 with a bit of help from Oscar Ridden on Renekton. I thought that was really cool to see, them finally taking that pick and playing really aggressive and dominant. One of the issues Fnatic has had over the last years has also been not really being able to find a balance between aggression and over-aggression. They often go too far, and then it feels like there's elements of tilt and choking when the pressure is on. So I was really happy to see this lineup coming together and seemingly learning a lot from what happened at MSI and even the last couple of weeks. Because summer has been a roller coaster for them, right? They won, I believe it was 6 games in a row. Then they lost streaked. Now they started winning and looking really good again. And if they can keep this form, I think there's a very good chance we're going to get another really, really spicy final, assuming that G2 is going to make it there for the rematch.
Oh, assuming.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Assuming.
You're
I
also
think
assuming?
we are still assuming.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
don't.
it's
Doesn't
gonna be-
G2 look like they will be there?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're gonna be fine. Honestly, like this was a good series. I'm with Broxah that I feel like G2 had a couple drafts that we haven't seen yet.
Can I just
What?
raise a point? When I say it's an exceptional
Yeah.
series, all I'm saying was it wasn't a clown fiesta. Like G2 didn't
No,
play
it
as well
wasn't.
as I expect them to, but it wasn't like
Yeah,
people in the mud slinging dirt at each other, right?
No.
It was a good series to watch. I'm not trying to pretend
I
it's
agree.
T1 Gen G or something, okay? No,
No.
because there'll be people in the comments. Okay, Cubby, quickly. There'll be people in the comments saying Medic's just so biased. He doesn't understand League of Legends. He loves G2. He just fillets them all days of the week, you know? I'm just going to get ahead of those comments and say, Broxah told me before the show that he thought it was an exceptional series. So that's the only reason I said it.
What? We didn't even talk about the series.
Yeah. No, we did. It was the
That might have
cameras
been-
weren't
Yeah.
rolling. This was before the clap. This was before the clap.
it might have been a bit of propaganda, you know,
I just
but
want
that's
to point
fine.
out,
Yeah.
I helped Medic get Master earlier today, and this is how
No,
he
you
thanks
did
me.
not.
We do,
You-
cute, and I
You
You
Brother.
lost
helped you
2
reaching
games in a
Master.
row. You lost 2 games in a row. I came in and saved you so that you then went on to win 9 more. And in my
Fight,
game that
fight,
would get me to
fight,
Masters,
fight.
you abandoned me. You left me out to dry, and I had a.
Hey.
I can't remember, but I lost the game because it was bad.
Did he go
Broxah,
1 and did he go 1
his
and
MMR
14?
might-
No, he just didn't play
Again?
the game. He was like, "Oh, my MMR's too hard to play with you now."
No, hit Medic's MMR was lower, but he was playing up to your level, so he was actually boosting
Exactly.
you. I think is what Medic's trying to say.
Anyway, back
Dun,
to
dun,
G2.
dun. Anyway,
Okay, so
like and subscribe.
I'm fine with the game. I'm like the games were good. What?
This is the most chaotic episode we have ever had. I
Just
love
keep
it.
going,
It's
just keep
amazing.
going,
Yeah,
just keep going, Cubby.
Sorry.
All
Keep
right.
going.
The games were good. I liked it. Yes, things got down in the mud a little bit. I think part of that was because G2 were playing really squishy comps, and Fnatic has to keep on pushing forward, especially with sums down, to actually force stuff. They did a nice job of that in this series. And I think that G2, like, I want to see them clean up drafts just a little bit. I think it's fine. Like, game 2, they played the Varus 5 pick. I'm actually, like, super down for Renekton in this game. You're playing a Cassante Sejuani topside. I don't think a Zero Ezreal can get through you, and it gives you a much better front line to like actually have the Kai'Sa and the Lucian play it in. Also, I would actually advocate for Gnar, but BB doesn't play Gnar. And that's still a pick that I feel like in that scenario would have been quite good. Game 3, I will give Fnatic a lot of credit. I know that was a game that did get really messy, and G2 almost played their way back in. But if you pressure the Ornn versus Renekton matchup for the Ornn side, you can get it like neutralized early, somewhat get ahead, and we really saw Ornn be like that massive frontliner that Fnatic needed later on that I feel like turned that game around in what was a rather messy game. I do think like there are angles for Ornn to be played. I was glad to see Oscar play it. I know that TL played it this past week in Renekton. I thought that Impact also played that matchup really well. I think that as playoffs get closer, we're going to see more Ornn just because, like, for me, I think he's missing in this meta. The reason that Leona is so good for me at the moment is how she interacts with the mage junglers. The fact that you have non-committal engage outside of their range. If they're flashless, you can always attack them. Ornn is the same thing. And if you get good matchups for Ornn, you can really pressure the map later on, which I think we saw Fnatic do. I just think that G2, like, I appreciate the fact they're playing these comps. I do think there's a world where Varus top can win and be a good pick. But I also think in the games they played, just it didn't have enough frontline. Like, why I went Renekton in that game too. It's Maokai Rakan frontline. That's really not a real frontline. And then the other Varus game was game 4, where that had more frontline, and they were actually able to win it. So I think the G2, like, I appreciate what they're cooking. I feel like they cooked a little bit too hard in this series, though, at times, and it kind of bit them.
I think what needs to be noted is also that in the first 4 games, meaning the games where Fnatic didn't play in Italy, G2 were actually really far ahead in all of them. 2 of them, they got the advantage and they were able to win fairly convincingly, and then there was 2 games where they ended up fumbling the gold leads, and it was difficult. One of them, like you mentioned, the triple AD carry comp going wrong and having a hard time adjusting in team fights. The other one, they actually played a more standard team comp and still ended up losing out in team fights. And I think for them, they definitely did some limit testing, both in drafts and play, but now, you know, coming into the next round, they're going to be able to get a lot of practice, both in scrims and also in the next round against the winner of BDS and Carbon Corp before they face Fnatic again. So I think it's going to be a very, very different final. Because G2 at their best, if they consistently get those advantages, it should be a 3-0. And you got to give props to Fnatic for still finding the openings to come back and play well from behind. But it wouldn't happen against G2 at their best for sure.
Yeah, I really appreciated, like, looking back. I was calling it like Torpedo Azir from Humanoid in game 2. I know it didn't work out game 3. Like, he was literally just sending himself in. Like, that's the way you have to play it, right? You got to close the gap. He played it really well. And yeah, I feel like Fnatic, like, they did find good angles. But again, for me, it was so weird to see G2 pick these really volatile comps, because when I think of Fnatic at their best, it is Razork and Humanoid playing quite aggressive. Mm-hmm. And if they do get ahead, they can really snowball those leads forward. So I do think that, like, G2, they're kind of trying to find out, hey, we think we can play this stuff in the meta. What's the limit of it? How can it fit? And once they kind of like get better at picking the places where it's good, I do think they're going to be just fine when they rematch in finals, most likely.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a couple of people that stood out to me in the series, like Broken Blade had an uncharacteristic series. He struggled quite a lot, and part of that is compositionally, right? Like, even in the game where he popped off, it was the triple AD carries, and it's like, well, how do you actually play this comp effectively? But generally, I think G2 this year put a lot of weight on his shoulders to almost be a second true consistent player for the team. Like, you have Caps, who you generally know is going to perform well. Obviously, there are moments where he's craps, but he's relatively good. And then you have Broken Blade. And after that, like, everyone else has ups and downs in their form, but Broken Blade has been so solid this entire year. So when he starts to struggle a little bit, I think G2 can start to struggle a little bit. And we saw Fnatic actually trying to put him behind. Like, he was 0-10 on the Renekton. In the final game on the TF, he really didn't have any agency. So I think that was well planned by Fnatic. I also think Jun had another glow up. Going through spring, he was one of the best supports in the league, in my opinion, probably the best support. And then in summer, I felt that he tapered off a little bit, especially after the loss to G2 in the regular season. But this series, I think he had a really solid showing, and that's what Fnatic need as well. You need someone who can follow up the aggression that comes out from Razork in the early game.
I think then brings back the question for me: are we still a one-team region?
I mean, are we even a one?
Don't get too excited. Don't get too excited to answer the question.
Last week we said LCS and LEC might be one-team regions. I think neither of them are now. It's fine. I'm willing to overreact. I think it's more fun. I think it's kind of unfair when you call it a one-team region. Technically, I think LEC right now is a 7-team region because 3 have been eliminated from the finals.
You don't agree with Rage Bait?
Technicalities.
Okay, let's talk about the rest of the LEC then. Let's do that. Let's talk about the other teams.
We can finish talking about if we're a one-team region if you want, Ginny. We can finish that discussion.
No, it's okay.
Okay, sure. We'll move
Thank
on.
you so much for offering Medic.
No
yeah,
worries.
let's move on to the rest of the LEC and let's talk about SK. I want to talk about SK first because obviously they placed the highest in the regular season and their bot lane has been instrumental in regards to their success, but it felt like it all fell apart this week.
No, I'm good. We don't need to talk about that. Let's move on to a different topic, Jenny.
Let's move on to the next topic. Okay, let's move on to the fact
no, we can talk about SK.
Medic...
We can talk about SK.
No, I don't want to talk about SK anymore. Can we talk about another team?
SK is not going to like that, Ginny. I want to talk about SK personally.
Okay, you can talk about SK, Cubby. I'll give you permission.
Someone else go first, though.
I think the downfall of SK is obviously frustrating for SK fans because they did finish first in the regular season. The expectations were, maybe they can challenge for a final, maybe they can get further into summer playoffs. I do think that Carmine Core have just played better than expected. I think Carmine Core have leveled up a lot more than any of the other teams in playoffs, really. Even Fnatic, as like we were mentioning, I think G2 kind of downgraded a little bit and Fnatic got a little bit better. But Carmine Core looked nice in day than they did even in the start of the regular season. They look like so much more coordinated a team. I think the thing you'll always focus on with SK is, well, there's a couple of things. Their bot lane, obviously, Rahel and Luon, they still look good. They were still winning the 2v2s in lanes, but they weren't able to then translate that into the rest of the game. And part of that, I think, was draft, because often we saw Carmine Core just get to a position where they had this tank ball that was unkillable. And Carmine Core would just go in, everyone would be tanky, they'd get one kill, and they'd all get out before they lost another man in the fight. And then they'd reset, Warmogs would activate, walk back into the fight. Sweet, excellent. You can't really do much about it, right? So I don't think Rahel and Luon have deproved. What's the opposite of improve? There's a word.
Well, we can go with
they
deproved.
haven't deproved. I think they're still a very good...
They regressed,
Can we go with nerfed? Yeah. Okay.
No, because nerfed implies external forces. Someone has to nerf
Maybe it was
right?
external forces.
Which you could argue it was, because we're seeing SK Gaming in playoffs, which historically hasn't really been the greatest time,
Sure. Okay, they were nerfed by SK Gaming being in playoffs. We'll go with that. But they haven't regressed. I think Irrelevant hasn't looked as strong as he used to. He hasn't been as consistent a carry for this team, and we see him off his Gnar often. His Kennen looked okay. The Renekton meta I don't think suits him as much as things that have a little bit more playmaking potential and aren't just point-and-click CC bots as the game goes on. And then I think Niski had a bad series. I think Niski generally wasn't really able to translate any lead he garnered individually, but also wasn't really able to have impact in team fights where he was needed to push the fight over the edge.
I do just want to throw out this clause for SK. They should have won game one. They lost off one bad dragon fight.
Just don't take the bad dragon fight.
That was a free win, yeah.
They played a good game, and they won the dragon fight. They just overcommitted and got, 3-man shock blast and a 3-man Shurima shuffle,
wasn't it? Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, it was really well played by KC, but that was a very big overcommit from SK. So, I really feel like that their narrative on them, if that game at least goes their way, which I feel like it should have because they were winning for 95% of it, it's better. Yes, I think Irrelevant didn't have the best Kennen game, but he still found a solo kill and was ahead. SK's bot lane was ahead in that game. It's just that game two, it kind of all came crashing down in pretty tough fashion. I think that SK, for me, they are a team that is always going to want to play fast. And sometimes what we see in playoffs is that teams play slower and they benefit. And guess what? We have an Orange Jinx comp coming out from KC. We have a Jace Azir Ezreal comp in game 1 coming out from KC, and SK ran out of gas in both games. And I really feel like that's why we've almost seen SK get nerfed in playoffs, because this is something that's also happened for a big chunk of Niski's career. This guy plays fast. He's the jungle whisperer. He wants to, have the game start in his favor and then snowball it quickly. And in playoffs, when everyone kind of takes a deep breath and they make sure that they're taking 70-30s and 80-20s instead of 60-40s, that hurts Niski's play style, and in this case, SK. So I do feel like SK, they didn't play super far off from what I expected. I just think that they played the style I expected and didn't play fast enough to actually win.
I got that.
I definitely also think the way Carmen Corp plays from behind is very impressive, because in the series against MDK, where they ended up 2-0ing them, they were kind of struggling in both early games, but eventually when it came to the later stages and team fights, whenever MDK overstepped, Carmen Corp were able to pull the trigger immediately, and then with amazing team fighting from everybody, setting up Vladdy and Upset for success, they just destroyed them. And the SK series was in some ways a similar story, where with the level they're showcasing right now, if you're a middle of the pack or a bottom team, having a good early game is just not enough. And this is usually how it goes if you're a top team. It literally doesn't matter where you're at in the game. You're just gonna skill check your opponents in team fights and have much better cohesion. And I think that's what is really impressive about them right now. Whether or not that's gonna be enough to beat BDS here in the next series, I guess time will tell, and that's definitely also gonna come down to what version of BDS we're gonna see, because it could be a close series, but if the BDS that we've seen so far in playoffs is gonna show up, KZ honestly might just 3-1 or even 3-0 them.
Yeah, I totally agree
Wow,
with that. I think
that was gonna be my next question.
Oh, do you want to ask it?
But no, I'm okay. I would like to hear your opinion about this, Medi, because I appreciate it.
I actually have a question for Broxah, if that's okay.
No.
We've seen a lot of
What is up with
Sejuani
you today,
Maokai.
Jimmy? What is this?
Sejuani Maokai.
Sorry.
Sej Maokai is a pretty traditional matchup. It has changed a bit, especially I think this season with the items being different. Do you still feel like Maokai can be a soft counter to Sejuani? Because I saw some chatter going on that this shouldn't be the answer that teams have, and we have seen it struggle a bit. To be fair, that is how KC closed out the series. We also saw it, the Fnatic G2 series, saw Sejuani get the best of Maokai in game 2. What do you think about this matchup? Is this something that teams should be abandoning? Because I'm recognizing a few matchups that I feel like teams should be abandoning. Personally, I'm really out on K'Sante and Renekton. I'm seeing so many people answer K'Sante and Renekton, and for me, you're just signing up to lose and pray you're more effective in team fights. You know?
I think it's kind of an interesting conversation, because I feel like both Sejuani and Maokai definitely have a lot of value in the current meta, and I think which one of the two junglers you get doesn't matter too much if you're on a really solid team, because they're slightly similar but also have different strengths and weaknesses. I think for a team that's not fully on the same page generally when it comes to team fights, and that's not the greatest at setting up, having a Sejuani who can just instantly engage and start a fight is always gonna be great, because it's much harder for the enemy team to react to a Sejuani ult than a Maokai ult, right? That's a little bit slower, and I think at the moment, for a lot of teams, I would generally value the Sejuani over it, just because, again, team fighting is so straightforward. You just insta engage, everybody follows, and it's nice and easy. But ultimately, I think in a lot of ways the champions are so similar, and I'm sitting here looking at the win rates at the moment as well, and the win rates kind of showcase it as well. With that being said, I do think it's a little bit boring that we're seeing these two champions so often, and I definitely think there's windows where you can lock in something different, like the Nidalee, to play aggressive and shut them down in the early game with 1-2 pushing lanes, especially now that we're seeing some Jace and we're seeing marksman being played. I could easily imagine running you know, Jace top with Nidalee jungle or Lilia or whatever. I could see Morgana jungle working. The way I look at it is that often, if you go tank top and AD mid, you can easily lock in one of the really strong AP junglers that are terrorizing solo queue right now, and that are also terrorizing some of the pro games. And I think in the right moment, that could really bring you one step ahead, because just having that one extra threat, both in the early game to create an advantage, and if you do it really well, snowball and destroy the enemy team, but even later in team fights, I think could be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with the matchup. I just think that like Maokai kind of eats it early, and in playoffs especially, like it is really nice as Sejuani. Like you always have the full playbook. You can do whatever you want on that champ, and she can kind of make it work. And I do think that teams have been taking advantage of that early. I'm glad you brought up Morg. This champ's being slept on. It's a 2-button champ, and I hate it because of that. But those 2 buttons are really, really strong. And she clears kind of fast too. You know,
really good with the
for sure.
reset on W.
Yeah.
I think for the Maokai Seju matchup early game, it's like Sejuani definitely slightly stronger, but a lot of it in pro play is also always going to come down to lane prio and which jungler is able to have, you know, assistance from the laners and which not, right? Because even if you're in a losing matchup, if your laner's able to assist you, you can do whatever you want.
Are we in that sense expecting more, I guess, explosive drafts when it comes to the last week of the summer split? Because we've seen a couple of changes here and there. So. I mean, what do you want to see change? Because I agree, Maokai Sejuani is like a little bit of a resident sleeper. What do you want to see, Cubby, when it comes to these drafts?
I mean, we saw G2 like really playing around with it. I just think that there's always a big advantage, like in the back half of playoffs or the meta, like if you have a pick that you know you can play that other teams haven't seen. Everyone's going to play on this patch for a really long time. Like if you are practicing, like I think Gangplank, like low key is playable in a couple drafts right now. If you're able to bust out a Gangplank and your team has 10 games on it and the opposing team has seen like 1 or 2, you could find a lot of edge, right? So I think that if you like, there are niches where like you can find a champ that's really good. I mean, we saw a game 3 Morgana that went really well. Like there's ability to surprise an opponent and make sure that you were going into a game with more info than what they're probably going to have against your pick. So I'd like to see twists, especially in the back half of playoffs when people really start to figure out a patch. If you have a different answer to something that teams haven't seen, I think it's strong.
I just don't think we're going to see it that much in the LEC. Like G2 is the team I could see doing it, but Carmine Core have to get top 3 to make it into season finals. So they're going to play the stuff they know works for them that's only been working for them for a month. BDS look like shit at the moment, so they're going to play the stuff they're comfy with because they want to make sure they're warmed up for season finals. And Fnatic want to win the split. Okay. So the only team I can see being like, I mean, like Fnatic could experiment a little bit because they've been together for a while, like, and the core at least, and we saw that with Nidalee from Razor because they're comfy. But the only team I really see like triple AD carry comps coming from and that little bit more explosiveness is G2, and we've already started to see that from them.
When it comes to creativity in draft, I guess in that sense has been addressed in terms of the teams we can and can't expect it from. I also want to talk a little bit more about BDS because I do agree there. I mean, you're saying shit. I'm gonna say lackluster in regards to their performance.
Compared to where they should be, they have been really bad. And I'm a BDS ambassador. If I'm calling them shit, I'm pretty sure you're allowed to have permission. Like, they don't want me to lie. They don't want me to come on the internet and tell lies. Who would do that? Not me. I'm here to tell
Broxah,
tell
he gets paid by Team Liquid to hate on Fnatic. I mean, to hate on G2. Anyways, that is whatever.
That's so true.
What is it particularly with BDS? Because I feel like it's not the team that we saw during the BO1s. Is it just the BO3s? Is it the changes in meta? Are they just like literally lost? Does it feel like a lot of their identity came particularly from Adam and in regards to how he plays in that top lane, but that's also not something we're seeing anymore. So what's going on?
I think Adam's really struggled to adapt to different top lane champs. Like, he's always trying to, but at his peak it was gods, right? Garen, Olaf, Darius, Set. And when
Thank you so much for explaining that.
And when you see him on things like the Cassante,
that's a long break.
when you see him on things like the Cassante or the Renekton, he just doesn't have the same impetus. I also think Labrov and Sheo are not teaming up as well as they used to do. Like one of the core parts of BDS's identity was the ability of Labrov and Sheo to move around together and set up plays together, and we're just not seeing that right now. I think Sheo is underperforming alongside Adam. I mean, I think the whole team's kind of underperforming apart from Ice. Nuke had that one really good Tristana game, but apart from that, I don't think he's looked like as good as he was during the regular season. So it feels like a mismatch between they can be comfortable on late game comps that just look for team fighting, but they don't seem to be able to navigate through early game to get to that point anymore. And the main thing that helps you get to that point safely is support and jungle synergy. So I have to look at Sheo and Labrov and say, is there a miscommunication happening there? Alongside that, having your lanes, not losing lanes is always a benefit. So everyone kind of needs to step up a little bit.
I think it's
win lane lose game.
Because I feel like the biggest strength have always been the way they play macro and how good they are at being just structured and playing by the book in mid and late game, and they've always been solid in team fights. But at the moment, watching BDS just feels like they're trying so hard to survive early game, and then they pray that their Korean lady carry Ice is going to take over and carry in mid and late game, which they got away with a couple of times during the regular split. But now when it's the best teams in the league left, and the teams are also going to be able to invest a lot more time into preparing different strategies for you and taking more risks in the series, they're really being taken advantage of. Earlier you mentioned that you thought it wouldn't make sense for them to take any risks and they should just stick to what they know. I think this is going to be seen from two different points of views. I've been in situations before on teams where whatever we thought worked, or whatever worked for us in the past, just didn't work anymore. And we just had to change it up and do something completely different because we knew that otherwise we were doomed. An example could be 2017 Worlds, where we went 0-4, and then we went from playing, let's say, tanks jungle every game with Sejuani and Tank Gragas to only playing Elise and Rek'Sai and just playing like complete maniacs because we had nothing to lose. And we knew that it would catch the opponents off guard, and it worked. And we made it to the quarterfinal at Worlds that way. So I think sometimes if you have something up your sleeves that you're really comfortable with and that you may have practiced at some point in the past, now could be an opportunity for you to run that risk, especially because they're about to play a best of 5, and if they can do something random that Carmen Corp doesn't expect in the first game and get a win off of it, there's a chance that Carmen Corp are gonna need to have a locked ban the rest of the series.
I can see that argument actually more for BDS. Thinking about it now, like they're locked for season finals, so I think Carmine Core have a lot more weight on winning that series, whereas for BDS, if they throw something out, they lose the game and then end up losing the series by 1 game. Like, obviously that sucks, but because they're already in season finals, it's less impactful for them. So I can definitely see that viewpoint, Broxah.
I think that for that series specifically, I am curious to see what happens with the Jace pick. I think it's always been a great champ for Kana, but I think it's uniquely been really good for K-Corp because he's able to get it out of the lane phase, and then you just scale to infinity on that champ. Like, you always pack so much damage. But yeah, like for me, it is going to be interesting to see if how top line goes. I think that the more I think about it, that's a pick that I'd probably deny, but also with like Adam's recent performance, and I think Kana's been a big piece for this team. If BDS could find ways to set top behind, hope their bot lane wins, which they should in the lane phase, and then snowball the victory, we might be able to see BDS return to some of the form that we saw earlier in the split. So I can see a path to victory. I just think that, like, for me, it's about attacking Kana in this series.
I think a lot of discussions that we had in the past was around this topic of inconsistency when it comes to LEC teams, because we're talking about SK being out, the team that was top of the table. Runner-up was BDS. Medic literally called them shit, even though he's an ambassador and they literally pay him to be nice. So And then we're looking at MDK. MDK is out. They are very inconsistent, winning more games in the last day of regular split than they did throughout the entirety of the split. They're now going to South Korea, allegedly, for a boot camp. It's like, what is happening? Why are these inconsistencies occurring? Because we've technically, like, these teams only had a week off, and it just felt like that 1 week just literally shat on everyone and everything.
I mean, I'll be honest. I think that the reason we saw the standings the way it was is because G2 took a break after MSI, which they should have. Like, if G2 is coming in the same form they came into Winter and Spring Split in, they probably take top of the table. And also Fnatic, like, credit to Fnatic. I mean, that, like, one thing that, like, we didn't bring up with the Fnatic 3-2 is that they were falling off at the end of the regular season. So for them to turn it around, like, given that too, and actually take down G2, I think is a huge confidence boost for that team going into the rest of the split. It's not like we expect them to miss Worlds or anything, but I think Fnatic, like, winning LEC is a huge achievement for them, given how good of a team G2 is too, regardless of just going international. And that's going to be a big boost for them for the rest of the split.
I agree with that. I think if for it being a smaller split, it's still been 6 years since Fnatic took any silverware home from Europe, right? Like, if they can win this split and then pick up the season finals title with the momentum, that would be phenomenal. And even if they just win this split and then continue to perform and challenge G2, I'd be very impressed by them. They are a very motivation-driven team, as all teams are to a degree, but I think a team like G2, I trust more to be able to deal with loss, whereas a team like Fnatic, sometimes you see a little bit more of the downward trend when they start losing. So I have a lot of hope in that Fnatic lineup. I think talking about inconsistencies, Ginny, there's a couple of things. Like, firstly, best of ones is you do often see inconsistency in best of ones. Maybe your meta read is bad. Maybe the patch change comes in and we have triple AD carries in games. It's like, well, my mid laner plays Azir and Syndra, and now he has to learn how to play Tristana, Lucian, and, you know, all this other Zeri. Like, if you haven't played Zeri, you need to get like 40 games on her before you can actually be competent on that champion, right? So some people who are a bit more flexible have the ability to be more consistent. And also it depends on how you train and how willing the players are to try new stuff when a patch comes in, right? Like, if you have a good scouting and good analysts who can be like, actually, Urgot is giga broken right now. And then you have a top laner who says, yeah, I'll play 20 games of Urgot over the next 2 days and we can see if we can get it into our draft. That's more likely to perform well than a top laner that says, no, I only play tanks, you know? And I'm not saying, I'm not using any specific names, but obviously you're going to be more inconsistent when the patch changes so regularly.
I also think that, I mean, for some of the teams, they just really haven't managed to improve ever since the winter split. Like, MDK, for example, one of the things one of the things that made them really special was Alvaro and Mervyn surprising everybody in winter. Alvaro was arguably the best support in that split, at least alongside Mickey. And then Mervyn had all his meme top lane picks that nobody really knew how to play against and that he got away with. But in both spring and summer, it feels like he's worse than most of the other top laners and standard picks, and his meme picks are also not working anymore. And whatever they're trying just doesn't seem to work. Like they've really dug themselves into one hell of a hole, and they really have to find an entirely new identity at this point. And then Heretics, for example, I think have had incredibly questionable drafts throughout the entire summer season. And not only that, but their coordination is really bad. They struggle in team fights, and I think it's almost the classic of bringing together so many veterans onto a team, and I can't know what's happening within the team, but you can just see they're not on the same page. All of them have different ideas of how the game should be played, and that really, really haunts them. And I think it's a classic example of sometimes just, if you have a team that goes for a lot of plays that are far from perfect, at least if they do it together, and at least if they follow through and they're fully on the same page about what they're doing, often it's going to be a success. But if you're on different pages, as often as they are, no matter what you do, everybody's going to look bad and it's just going to be a disaster.
Damn. A disaster. Wow. That is
Well,
definitely
it's a
one way to end
disaster.
off that
They're
sentence. I was
out.
like, whoa. No. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is a disaster, and they are out. And with them being out also comes the community speculation in regards of what's going to happen to some of these players that have been playing for a longer time and that are currently not performing to the expectations that people have from them. Jankos being an example, Hilly being an example of that as well. These two veterans who are they retiring? Is that going to happen? And I think that's another conversation maybe to touch upon here, because both Vitality and Heretics are out.
Yeah, I mean, I think Heretics in particular is an interesting one because they made changes that were perceived as upgrades in most of the roles, like changing Evi for Wonder, changing Mercer for Trimby. Video for Perks was a bit of a question mark. Obviously, it didn't really work out, and I think in hindsight they might regret getting rid of Video. But ultimately, it didn't look like bad changes on paper. But despite that, it's been really rough. And last year, Jankos was considered a top 3 jungler in the league throughout the entire year, with Heretics being bad. This year, that's not the case anymore, and I wonder, where he's at mentally, because I can't really remember a season where Jankos wasn't considered a top 3 jungler in the LEC, and right now he's at the very bottom. I can imagine he wouldn't be going anywhere despite some speculation, because if you've achieved all that Jankos has achieved, it probably wouldn't feel right not getting a chance to stand up for yourself and show that you still got it and you're still one of the best players, but who freaking knows?
I think it's always a struggle when you get to this time of year, right? Especially with LEC ending so early for some of these teams, where you basically have 6 months of speculation, right? Like it's until we have people back, and when you end your season on low notes, it's not even just whether you want to retire or not. Sometimes it's like, well, people see you and they're like, oh, he was on Heretics and he struggled. Or like for Hilly, like a lot of the discussion this year around Hilly was, is he inting? Is he creating space or is he inting, right? And you can have coaching staff that trusts you. And I know like Mac and Pad really trust Hilly, and maybe he stays at Vitality. I don't know what his contract length is. But it's not always a player choice, which kind of sucks. When you only have 100 places in a league, 50 places in a league.
50.
Sometimes.
Quick maths.
Yeah. Thanks. So I was talking about the expansion of LECs to 20 teams next year. That's definitely going to happen.
Leaks?
Leaks? Yo!
Yeah. I don't think we need an LEC 2 Electric Boogaloo yet, but who knows? When you only have 50 places in the league, sometimes it just becomes this guy's a rookie. And like, we've seen you for 7 years. We've seen you for 6 years. We're not sure you actually bring enough new to the team to justify your spot, right? It would be a shit way to lose a Hilly or to lose a Jankos if that does end up happening. I'm not saying it's going to. I haven't heard any specific rumors about it. We'll hear them more probably in November, But yeah, that would suck.
I hope for these guys. It is a really long break, and that stinks. But I really hope that these guys take a step away, take as much time as they need to figure out what they want to do. And selfishly, I hope they come back, because like the league's better with Jankos and Hilly in it, regardless of how they performed this split, what they've achieved in the past. And I don't think by any means like it's probably the toughest split I've seen from Hilly in a while. But man, I still love when Hilly plays support at his best. He is such a joy to watch, and I think both these players, when you are such a creative player, which I really think that both can claim, you are going to have ups and downs if everyone around you is going to level up. They weren't on the best teams to start with as well. We're not expecting them to top 2 the league like that they were in the past. So I think they get exposed a little bit more. But man, creativity in this game is such a gift, and I really hope that like selfishly these guys come back and we get to see more creative plays from each of them, because it is a lot of fun when they like each of these players are at their
I
best.
think your point about perspective is also a big one, because I mean, we're only in July. There's a long time till the off season happens, and before these guys get a chance to even talk to teams and discuss what's going to happen next year. Like I know when I decided to take my break from pro play in 21, our season also finished in August, and I came back to Denmark and took, I think, 2 months completely away from League. And at first, I just kind of assumed that I would come back and I would, play LCS or LEC, and I was in touch with some teams at first. But then eventually I realized that, it might actually be healthy for me to do something entirely different. And I've talked to players.
Oh, what did you decide to do, Broxah, instead? Instead of playing League as a job, what did you decide to do? A totally different thing.
Well, there's a very, very big difference, Medic, between being a streamer and a pro player, believe it or not.
You're a streamer? Oh, I thought you were just talented.
He's not on TikTok. He's not on TikTok.
You called me talented?
He's not. No. Talent.
I am, Broxah.
I didn't say talented. At playing League?
That's a win in my book. Anyways,
I
think
it must be a really small book.
The perspective can change a lot, and I think none of those guys even really know right now what's going to happen. Most of them are probably going to be looking to return, but you never know what's going to happen. And I also think it's worth noting that losing some of the big stars is brutal for the scene. Like, for example, in NA, not having Double F, Bjergsen, Sneaky, etc. is really, really not ideal for anyone. Europe has already lost someone like Reckless. Perks is not around. We need some of the big boys to still stay to bring hype and engagement and whatnot.
Yeah.
I think that's a really
on that
good
train.
point.
On that train, I hope Odo comes back too. I'd love to see Odo continue to compete. It's another player that I know he's still around on the broadcast, and it's really the cast with him and Perks is super fun. Watching them go back and forth, but I'd love to see him compete as well.
I think as well, like something that everybody kind of touched up on a little, like all three of your answers, was the fact that the off season is so long, and you mentioned it yourself, Medic, like probably we're not going to be hearing these rumors until November, as these players can't even really realistically be talking to teams right now. And I want to hear it from like a player perspective, like probably like Broxah, in terms of like the uncertainty that comes with the off season and how players should or could handle that, or what, like, I'm going to talk about it from like a talent perspective. I can tell you, like, not knowing whether or not like you're going to come back is like obviously always going to be really stressful, but I cannot even like put myself in the shoes of a player and be like, well, I got 6 months to do nothing. Like, how do they mentally do that?
I mean, it's not even that you have a period at first where you're doing nothing, but it's also very rare a team is going to let you get away with doing absolutely nothing for a very long time, because you still have contractual obligations like streaming, sponsor commitments, and then the off season generally is not really a time where you rest much because the future is so uncertain. I do also want to point out that even during the year, there's still a lot of question marks and stress. And I've been on teams where it felt like even week to week, none of us knew what was going to happen or if a change would be made at some point. It's just super volatile.
Damn.
So there's a limit to how much it changes for them, mentally speaking, in that regard. But of course, it is very strange going from having a really, really clear purpose of working towards something with your team to all of a sudden having to wait 6 months for a new season to start again and not knowing where you're going to be at that point in time. But it's also like the longer league is around, the more veteran players are going to be sitting out at the start of a year. I know it's something I talked to Finn about at the start of this year, because he wasn't able to find a team. Trimby also didn't find a team. There were others as well that were expected to join the LEC. And then Finn and I talked, and we were like, well, it sucks that he's not playing for Winter, but probably eventually somebody's going to make a change and you're back in. and it happened. Like all of a sudden, he's been playing for Rogue for a couple of months, and it's just a crazy roller coaster being a league player in the current day and age. But I have a feeling that's any sport really. It's just part of life.
Damn. No, I agree. Like, I work across multiple titles, and I feel like this is an issue that every single player across every single title has, which again also maybe plays into potentially some of the inconsistencies that we see. Because how can you realistically like be really locked in if, like you said it yourself, you don't even know if by the end of the week there is going to be a change. On that note, I'd like to make it a little bit more fun and entertaining. Well, depends if you qualify the LCS as fun and entertaining. I'm sure Cubby does. I want to talk about the LCS and Liquid, which I said fun and entertaining, but then we're going to talk about something a little bit sad.
I mean, they still won 2-1, but they didn't look that great in their series against Dignitas. One thing I was really curious about kind of both leagues, but especially LCS this week, just given that we were back, was the difference between the two teams that decided to go to EWC and the ones that stayed, and to see if there was any difference in like how they looked or prepped. I think FlyQuest looked fine. If anything, I think FlyQuest looked stronger. And we had Masu on Hotline League last night, and he said that going over there and scrimming teams like also gave them perspective. I also talked to APA after their games, and he shared the same thing. Like, he thinks that in the long run, they're going to be better, but they weren't able to play the same patch as everyone else, so their reads weren't quite as strong. I think we saw that in the games against Dignitas. I also, like, the way that Dignitas plays in drafts right now, I'm actually really against. I know that they have gotten they lost 2-1 to both C9 and TL, but it really feels like the way that Dig plays is pick champs at scale and wait for you to make mistakes and use their experience to make sure that you fall into those mistakes. Like, for me, this is what NA's done a lot in best of ones, and I do feel like Dig is okay at playing defense. I don't think their strength is going to be going out and like busting open lanes, because like Licorice and Jensen for me are two strong players in their own right, but I think Licorice being very self-sufficient and being strong as a laner, but not doing it to like cave people's heads in, doing it to join fights later. And Jensen as well is going to play for the fights in the groups, right? But yeah, I just think that like their comps at the moment lack a lot of agency, and that will hurt Dignitas moving forward when they will inevitably have to play like the clear 3 top teams we have in LCS right now to make it to Worlds potentially and, you know, crack the top 3. So it was a close series. I feel like TL should have lost it, but they found a way to come back. Like, it kind of reminded me of G2 coming out of MSI. You know, like, we knew that G2 wasn't the best at the start of summer. They were losing games, but they were still making the games way closer than what they should have been. Like, TL should have lost that game, and they ended up turning around because their mid game was better. Yeah, TL looked weaker this week, but I want to see, you know, now they're back in the schedule and not traveling, if they can fix this quickly, which I still have faith they can.
I definitely think that the Dignitas TL series was a very interesting one with, like you said, very odd, almost disrespectful drafting from Dignitas and Team Liquid that has been looking perhaps even at their worst, or at the very least the most unconvincing so far in Summer Split. I think for the Dig point specifically, I definitely think that if you're playing League in this day and age and you're drafting full scaling and you don't have any agency, you're doing something wrong. Like, looking at that lineup, most of the players were also really aggressive and were able to play forward when they had success in the past. So you might as well look to dive back into that and find a way to set everybody up for success in the same way. Because if you are naturally going to fall down a couple of thousand gold and just sitting and waiting for enemy team to make mistake in every game due to draft, you are doing something wrong. And even if you get lucky and you make it to an international tournament someday, you're going to have a 0% chance of winning against any team, because they're not going to throw. And it's going to be the same when the LCS continues to level up. You're just not going to get those openings that you're looking for. I think the game 3 in that series was really interesting. Like you said, CL might as well have lost, but it's funny how one single Baron turn from Team Liquid made what was a very close game just end instantly. Like, it's one of the craziest, most random endings to a game I've seen in a very long time, where you kind of imagine some fighting and some back and forth for a while, and all of a sudden Team Liquid ends up winning the game in 24 minutes. And if you look, just at that, like, wow, they won in 24 minutes, you would think they stumped them, but it's just another case of, that alone really not telling the full story.
Nice.
There's a small degree of lag between
the conversation. I do have a little bit of lag. My internet is a little shit.
Only half of them are deliberate, I promise. Only half.
I would say
Maddox earlier was definitely deliberate.
Yo, no, that was on purpose. No,
definitely.
I was like, I just kept like looking at the screen, thinking like, am I lagging that bad? And then I saw Cubby laughing. I was like, okay, we're just all
no,
like.
There are gonna be people like on the podcast who are like gonna be like pulling up like the Spotify or like the YouTube or like and subscribe to find us everywhere. Of course, they're gonna like be checking that to be like, did I pause? Like, did something happen? Be Medic stone cold, just like.
I think for Dignitas, part of the problem is there's 3 good teams in the league, right? Like, then alongside that, it's like you have to be 100 Thieves or NRG for like if you want to be the 4th best team. They do have an easy rest of their schedule, and they can probably win the rest of their games by playing the let's wait for the enemy to make mistakes style, which might be bad because it means they might not change their style. They have Shopify, then they have NRG, then they have Immortals, which they should be. I mean, NRG is the only one that I would say is a closer series, but Shopify and Immortals they should definitely be beating with the caliber of player they have. So, it's frustrating to see a team with so many good players not be a little bit more aggressive. And maybe Inspired was right. Maybe Jensen is just a vegan mid laner. And they just want to be vegans the whole time, and they just don't want to do anything. Yeah,
that sounds like a really interesting gameplay. Really would love to see that. But you know what I want to see, or like what I would like to discuss, is when we're looking at the team like Dignitas with the game, with the style and the approach to the game that they have, how can teams that we would classify below them in terms of the experience or in terms of the caliber that we've seen from them, how can they counteract that? What do we expect other teams to just like pull out from their sleeves to be like, okay, you want to scale, you want us to make a mistake, instead we're going to do XYZ, and as a result your entire strategy fails?
I think the way I look at LCS and LEC right now is that both leagues have a clear top 3 and both leagues have a dark horse. In the LEC you currently have the Carmen Co-op. In LCS we have the Dignitas.
Casey's in? Casey's top 3. Just like that.
Have you put Casey in the top 3?
He said dark horse.
He did?
He said dark horse. He didn't. He said there's a top 3 and there's a dark horse.
I still, like, on paper in the LEC,
but you have a 3.
Fnatic G2 are top 3, but KC is now coming in as a dark horse contesting to reach the top. And I'm saying that in the LCS, it's kind of the same. We have C9, we have Team Liquid, we have FlyQuest. Dignitas is the one team that I think could surprise us and take down some of these teams if they can continue improving and fine-tune their style, so to speak. I think it's also worth noting that these guys still haven't played together for that long, so the amount of growth and improvement we can see from them could be much greater than what we're seeing from some of the other teams that have played together for a while. And I think that's something that in the long run could really, really give them an edge, because the fact that a team that has played together for a very short amount of time can already take games off of some of the best teams in the league and make it really competitive gives me a lot of faith in them. And exactly what their style is going to look like and what they're going to be doing in the long run is hard to say, but I think for them, part of why they're unwilling to take many risks when it comes to gameplay probably is also because they're aware the synergy is not on point yet.
But that's a good point, and I agree with your point. I want to put that out there. Ginny did ask, how do you beat a team that sits back and waits for you to make mistakes? So coming back to
I was
that
literally
question,
going to say...
You just play. You do things. You have a game plan, you stick to your game plan, and you don't let the other team jump on your mistakes because you just don't make the mistakes, right? Like, a lot of it is about controlling vision when you're trying to push out side lanes and making sure that the enemy team doesn't get to an objective before you if you want to play around the objectives, right? Like, teams that are proactive tend to beat teams that are reactive if they play proactively well. Because a reactive team needs the opportunity to jump on you, whereas the proactive team makes the opportunity to make the play, right?
Yeah.
That's why Heretics lost. Because they never really had a proactive style, or at least they didn't have one that was cohesive throughout the entire year. They were often reliant on their players being good enough to see the mistakes in the enemy playstyle, which sometimes they were, and often like they could see the mistake but they couldn't jump on it. But if you have a team that is willing to make the plays or adapt draft or like change the meta, then they're much more likely to be able to actually take games and win games because they have control of the tempo and the pace of the game.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair argument here, or a counter. Then I just would like to clarify here. Is proactive synonymous to aggressive, or is that more proactive, you have a game plan, you stick to it, and like the aggression is something completely different that can either be part of it or not?
I wouldn't have them as synonymous. You can be proactively delaying the game. I know that sounds weird, but you can like be deliberately saying, okay, they're going to look to do this thing. How do we stop them from doing that so we can get to 2 items, so we can get to 3 items? You can also be very aggressive proactively and be like, okay, we're going to shove waves, we're going to invade their jungle all the time, we're going to force fights, we're going to do all this action. That's fine. But being proactive just means deliberately taking steps to get to a set point. At least that's how I'm how I'm using the word here. Whereas teams that are more reactive and looking for mistakes, they'll be deliberately taking steps to look for the mistakes, but the enemy still has to make the mistake for you to be able to jump on it.
Yeah. That also, like, being able to move first. A lot of the Dignitas drafts, they can't move first. Like, you're playing Ivern Braum. Well, what moves you're going to do, right? Like, you have to wait for them to get into your side of the
Cameraman POV move.
Which did happen in that series, but yeah. What POV?
Cameraman POV move.
Okay, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, that's all you can do. What? Okay, anyway. I feel like Medic is not having a great time, but I'm really jealous of your cat.
Enacting emojis on the show. I'm going to be honest.
Emojis?
I like it.
Emojis. It's a Twitch.
It's good reason to tune into the video portion.
Yeah,
you know?
so, okay.
Yeah, maybe,
I can give you
no. The only reason why I should tune into the video portion is because Medic has his cat that literally came curled up on his lap and literally stayed there for the entirety of the podcast. If anyone is a cat owner, you will understand that cats literally never do that. So I don't know what kind of magician and sorcery you got going on over there, but I respect it. All right?
I can tell you what the
sorcery is. Same as I
is.
respect. Okay.
Oh, wait. Go ahead. No, go ahead. After you.
No. I want to know the sorcery.
In his pocket. That's the key.
Well, Kiki, who is the queen of our 2 cats, usually sits on my fiance's lap. But Mika has occupied my fiance's lap. So, by putting a blanket on my lap, human. I am the spare human. And Kiki has decided to deign me with her presence today. So.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. No need to explain any further. What I would like explained, though, is Swarm and why everybody in their goldfish is currently obsessed with playing it, with grinding it. I haven't had the chance to do it, like try it out myself, but I would like to hear you guys' opinion. I want to start with Medic, because I see you in that Discord. Anyone want to play? Anyone want to play? Anyone want to play?
So
I'm playing right now.
All PvE, roguelike, bullet heaven games, that's my jam. That's how I spend my spare time when I'm watching VODs or I'm watching Broxah stream or whatever. I'm there, WASD, moving my little character around, trying to create some sort of smorgasbord of lights on the screen. It's my dopamine hit for the day. Swarm is great. It's well optimized. The difficulty curve is really good. Basically, it's a PvE game. They're called bullet heaven games. Originally, the game type was bullet hell, which is where you have to dodge away from a lot of enemies' attacks. Now it's become bullet heaven, where you become the thing that has to be dodged from, basically. So you collect more upgrades throughout the game. It's 15-minute long, and at the end of each map, there's a boss, Rek'Sai, Briar, and Aatrox. And Bel'Veth. Rek'Sai, Briar, Bel'Veth, and Aatrox. So the idea is you have 9 different characters, I think, that you can play, have a bunch of different weapons, and you can go for a bunch of different builds and just, play. It's incredibly fun. I think it is the best thing that the League of Legends client has had since TFT. I would happily pay like a Vampire Survivors level of money to play this game consistently and have DLC come for it, right? It is incredible. It is truly top tier. It is almost at the level of an early access version of this game that I would buy on Steam. In fact, it's probably past that level because early access usually graphically isn't as good. They could very easily release this as a standalone game and then support it with DLC. It's what I wanted Riot Forge always to be. I think it's just so good. I really enjoy it. You should play it. You don't have to pay any money either. You can just play it for free. It's great.
Pog! I love that. Like every other esports fan.
Yeah. As someone that, plays League at a decently high level, I can't always play with all my friends, especially ones who want to pick up the game.
Do you know what friends are?
It's a really good way to play League. I try my best, Ginny. It's a work in progress sometimes, but we're doing
really
our best.
proud of
on
you.
one today.
Just
What is going on? It's like everyone has had a fight picked with them,
I'm not gonna lie. I feel like I got a heat stroke, so I'm kind of just like, yeah.
That's cool. As long as we're all acknowledging that you're on one today. That's
Yeah, I've only played a couple matches, but it's really well done. It's not my style of game. The last time I played a game like of this style would have been like Modern Warfare 3 Spec Ops. If anyone wants to go like way far back into that, me and my friends love to grind Spec Ops. That's like 10 plus years ago. But it has some of like the similar attributes in the sense that you do need to play and level a bit to actually be able to beat like the harder difficulties, which is okay because it scales up. And yeah, like if you have people that like want to get in the league or have an account that's like not level 30 or they might be bronze and you're diamond, in my case, it's a very good way to play with anyone and at least have something you can do together in the client. And it's very well done.
You don't have to play against people. Which, like,
Ooh.
You can
I
chill.
love PvE because it's just you against the game,
vibe.
and you decide how you decide the game on your terms, and you don't have to deal with a Lucian mid going 0-5 and buying Sork boots. It's just great. You get to decide how you want to play the game.
That sounds personal.
Yeah,
you
it was
talk
my
about
promo to master a couple of days ago. It happened to me.
Oh,
so.
I am so. I feel like that shit always happens in like promo games. I'm really sorry. But speaking of Lucian mid. This is why I should tune into the video. But I want to talk about Lucian mid because I feel like even in like pro play 80 carries, let's go! Tristana mid, I feel like everybody is seeing it a lot every game when it's not banned. So let's talk about that for a little bit, Brock. I wanna have your opinions, thoughts, feelings, emotions about the 80 carry meta that we're seeing right now.
Well, I think we have over the past years ended up in a situation where AD carry players convinced themselves that their role was useless. They started going on a rampage and they were crying to Riot for months and months and months about how useless their role is and how they want more agency and power throughout the entire game, especially early game. And all of a sudden, AD carries were buffed to a point where they've become so hard to deal with that they're being played in every single role. And I think it's the classic where, people then eventually realize that if you play these very powerful champions with very powerful items and solo lanes, they're going to become very, very high level, they're going to get more resources, and they can just take over games and in a way that you'll never be able to as an AD carry, where you share a golden experience with your support. I think in some ways it's definitely cool to see the style for pro play, for example, being able to see different mid laners and control mages, seeing some of these AD carry champions like Vayne and Varus being played in top lane, I think also makes it kind of unique. But I have to say, solo queue in particular is a bit of a terror at the moment. Like, I'm seeing all the craziest things being pulled out, and people first timing Siva mid and whatnot, and getting away with it because apparently you can play AD carry in every role whenever you want to. So I think it's this thing where people that enjoy these kind of champions better abuse them now while they can, because it's just a matter of time before Riot is gonna hit them hard with the ban hammer.
Yeah, I think there were a couple systematic changes like outside of the items that really contributed to this too. Like Absorb Life, that point was way too OP, and they nerfed it, and it's still pretty strong. Also, the removal of Tenacity and access to that from the rune tree. Like, I feel like a lot of the meta right now is dictated by, are you going to go steel caps or treads? And I think the teams actually need to be a lot more careful about how they draft. Like, seeing some like Sejuani Leona combos that I don't like when you can play Nautilus to try and like not get them to build treads. Because at the moment, like, that's part of the reason why we're seeing Leona back. There's way less access to Tenacity in the game. Pretty much only fighters can get it, as you get it from Sterak's and Wit's End, I believe. And that's it outside of treads. That's kind of made the meta very interesting, where if you play Leona and like you're going up against melees, Leona can just press Q on you and you get one shot by the ADs too. So I do think that like from a 5v5 perspective it is too. There are some ADs that I like and don't like in terms of being played like where. I think Varus top is doable. You cannot play Varus mid anymore after the lethality changes. We are not seeing lethality Varus. Zeri mid is fake. I hate it. And if there is a Zeri being shown, there should be more Sivir being played, actually. I think that champ's been a little bit forgotten about. And you get outranged, but your R is actually really good for dealing with multiple marksman comps, like being able to space with your team. So, yeah, I'm kind of done with this meta. I think the other issue is that the jungle meta, I hate when jungle meta is full clear only.
Thank
and
you.
Full clear, like, sub 315. It's so stupid. It's not interactive. The whole point of jungle should be deciding when and where to sack resources and then invest them elsewhere. And the fact that you can get everything you want and still be at plays right now is complete BS.
I'm actually getting so tired of both streamers and pro players that play jungle saying that if you're jungle right now and you gank, you make a mistake. Like, there's actually people that get challenger by never interacting with another player for the first 15 minutes of each and every game, and they get away with it. Back in my young days, when I learned jungle, the reason I fell in love with it was that in order for you to be successful, you had to gank and make plays, and you ideally had to help each and every laner, and you had all these bigger decisions to make. But nowadays, you can just full clear from one side to the other on repeat, and actually, if you don't, you're going to fall behind and you're going to be unable to carry, because these marksmen that, like you said, are all going to go fleet footwork and absorb life and be absolute monsters, are just going to destroy you.
Yeah, I think alongside that, the rise of Warmogs has kind of led towards you want more consistent DPS in fights, right? The ability to burst down a support or burst down jungler as a mage isn't really there anymore, because if you get them down to like a third HP, they walk away 5 seconds later, they're back to half, 7 seconds later, they're back to full HP. So you need someone that can consistently put out damage and not be entirely reliant on having like a cycle of cooldowns back up to do it, which means that we do see more AD carries. They also just get more push in lanes, and we've talked already about how important priority is just generally in pro play. As a second point, Riot just released an article saying they're doing more rotating game modes, which is super interesting to me. Anyway, that's kind of back to the Swarm thing. But yeah, they released it like an hour ago, and I hadn't seen it up until now. So they're just doing more. They're saying we think Arena and Swarm have gone really well, so we're going to make sure we do more of these, like similar to the Odysseys and such. Because in the part, like, remember we had like that 2-year spell where we got nothing. And it was just like, you can only play League of Legends. It's like, please, Riot. No, don't make me do this to myself.
What was the game mode where it was like the base defense?
Odyssey? Was it Odyssey?
No. No, it wasn't Nexus Blitz either. Even if I think Nexus Blitz is kind of fun. There was one way back where you were like spawning like red side Nexus, and you had to just defend the base from like really OP stuff coming in. It was actually kind of hard. I forget what it was called though.
I can't remember what it was either. There was Doombot. I really enjoyed Doombots as well.
I think it was Doombot. I think it was Doombot. Yeah, Doombot was fun.
I think that was
I
like
want to see that again.
I think it was a proper game of League, but it probably felt more like tower defense because of how OP the enemies were. Like Ziggs would throw out 3 bombs at once. A Mega Inferno bomb would split into multiple smaller Mega Inferno. Yeah.
Yes. It was super fun.
I would really like to try Twisted Tree Line because I feel like a lot of people talk about that one as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was fun. I mean, Cubby's is nodding yes. Broxah's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on.
Don't you say that, Medic.
Twisted Tree Line was only good because you had 2 less people on your team to be toxic.
One of the biggest, if not the biggest mistake Riot has ever made was removing Twisted Tree Line, and I'm going to stand by that till the end of time. It was by far the best game mode.
And you have rose-tinted glasses on, my friend.
It was so good.
I will say, I feel like Nexus Blitz is the 5v5 version of Twisted Tree Line now, and it's still quite fun.
It'll never be the same, though.
I mean, I guess it's worth...
I loved Twisted Tree Line. Sure,
I did like that
nostalgia involved, but I actually think one of the challenges of League right now is that there's no simple game mode for a new player to learn. If you go on Summoner's Rift, I mean, it's so overwhelming, it's complete chaos. If you go to ARAM, it's just as overwhelming because there's 100 skill shots and whatnot flying at you, and if you don't know what 160 champions do, you have no idea what's going on. But Twisted Tree Line was just so simple in terms of what you needed to do on the map. It's only 3 people. You can actually learn these steps one at a time. And I personally, and I started playing the game when there was like, I don't know, there was 40 champions probably, so it's way worse now. But back then, I didn't enjoy playing Summoner's Rift at all. I hated it. I had been level 30 for a long time before I started diving into that game mode. So I think for many reasons, just having more of these options to play real games of League of Legends that aren't just Summoner's Rift is like not having that option really sucks.
I can give you that. I can give you that as a learning experience, but as a replacement for Summoner's Rift, I don't.
Well, it's never going to be a replacement. I just think it's.
But that's how I viewed it, right? Like, I just wanted to play Summoner's Rift because I was like, I'm just going to play with my friends and play this. I didn't need a separate map to learn it on, but I appreciate how it helped you do that and how it could help other people do that. Still wasn't a great game mode. But
arguable.
Vilemore, best boss. I will give you Vilemore. She was great.
That could be, I guess, the hot take of the podcast by Medic. Twisted Tree Line was mid.
Yeah, right in the comments. Well, I don't think it was mid. I just don't think it was as good as everyone makes it out to be. Everyone seems to think it was the second coming of like whoever Jesus Christ is on Summoner's Rift, and it was. It's not the. It wasn't the messianic, sort of game mode. It was an okay game mode. You died to the jungle a lot. Like, it was very hard to jungle. I died to the jungle a lot. It was really hard to jungle.
You were legit worse than an Iron 4 player then, I'm sorry to say.
Oh!
Were you not playing Shyvana jungle, man? That was so OP.
I had to play Warwick. It was the only way I'd survive. Because maybe that's why I had a bad experience, because I played it, like, when I was level 10,
you not
and then just
runes?
hated it
you
forever.
You just started jungling when you had no idea how the game
didn't have the
worked.
runes.
Okay,
I'm
so
just
it wasn't
skill
a good
issues.
learning experience then, was it, Broxah? If I can't learn from
but the
Twisted
runes
Tree
are
Line,
gone.
then... Write in
But
the
the runes
comments
are
down
gone,
below if you
so-
think Broxah's wrong or if you think I'm right. No other options.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. And thank you guys so much for tuning in for today. I hope you guys all have a great evening, morning, afternoon, day, whatever it is, wherever you are. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
No.